So guys, you know the drill. VR has no games. I'm here to dispel that narrative. Welcome to the simulation inside the simulation. I am Tooodamngolden, your VR Voyager, and in my continuous quest to call out Cap, make sure you check out my first video on this subject. By the way, I'm counting down the top 5 PCVR games available right now. Let's go. So much like my first video in this series, guys, let me preface this list by saying that Half-Life Alyx will not be featured, as the overwhelming perception is that this stands as VR's best title. But if you do want to take a deeper look at this game, feel free to check out a video that I recently released about why Half-Life Alyx's release may have actually hurt VR development in the short to medium term. But enough of that, let's get right to it. Kicking us off at number 5 on today's countdown is the only game on this list that as of this recording has also been released on Quest 2, and I'm gonna just interject here to say that the Quest version of this game is a bit of a letdown, so please, if you have access to a VR ready computer, do get the PCVR edition. I'm talking of course about the stalker-inspired survival shooter Into the Radius, and if you spent any time at all within the PCVR scene, then you know that this game is an absolute gem. Produced by Northern European developer CM Games, Into the Radius is a hardcore post-apocalyptic survival shooter which takes place 15 years after the Pacholsk event, an event in which a massive earthquake spewed plumes of dust into the air, causing reduced visibility to the point of almost complete darkness. And after the dust settled, a dark red orb in the sky was ever present, which of course is complemented by black ash floating all around the area and the appearance of strange creatures known by the locals simply as anomalies. Cue you the gamer, and you are a survivor tasked with making frequent trips into Russia's Pacholsk zone for supplies and varied goods to sell as you attempt to survive in the harsh anomaly inhabited wastelands, in a title that certainly has a stalker meets metro feel to it, which in my book is a pretty solid foundation. A foundation of which CM Games builds upon with a very dark atmosphere that provides a nice twist on the tried and true post-apocalyptic Russian excursion by adding quirks to the traditional Eastern Bloc vibe with twisted sky trains, floating islands, and frozen in time's explosion. Guys, the atmosphere in this game feels unique, and while Soviet-era Russia itself is a very well-visited location in gaming as a whole, Into the Radius does feel different enough to stand out on its own. Plus, of course, the giant spherical death moon in the sky is always a little nice to look at. But for me personally, the best part of this game lies within the little details. Things like having to manually load each magazine with bullets, cleaning and repairing magazines before traversing back into the radius, or optimizing the space in your backpack so that everything is accessible during those intense moments are the absolute highlights for me, with Into the Radius being a survival shooter that places a heavy emphasis on preparation and maintenance, which really does make every single moment feel like a battle for survival. In addition to that, I would like to point out the nice job that the guys did in regards to providing different feeling environments for different areas found within the game, an issue that a lot of games suffer from, not just solely in VR, but within Into the Radius, the enemies in each area feel varied with not too much repetition existing between unique areas, so definitely a big kudos to them for that. Now, there are a few criticisms that I would like to point out, such as some general wonkiness from a visual standpoint, and to me that there are some inconsistencies with the actual grab points on various items and weapons, which can make things a little dicey in more intense situations, such as during the supernatural phenomenon known as the Tide, which resets enemies, items, and tosses the player to a random place on the map. Minor issues aside, guys, Into the Radius is an absolute top-tier VR experience, and with about a 20-hour campaign, it does have a lot more meat on its bones than the average VR game at the moment, which of course is a net positive for the gamer, and just one of many reasons why Into the Radius is firmly cemented at number 5 on today's countdown. So for those of you who watched my video where I counted down the best Quest 2 games, you'll know that we started off that particular countdown with the title called Green Hell VR, and at number 4 today is a game of a similar ilk but with enough personality that it stands out on its own, which is of course N-Night Games' produced survival horror title, The Forest. The Forest, while possessing some similarities to Green Hell VR, such as the locale type, lack of structured missions, and an ever-persistent need to gather resources to survive, is a much darker, much more atmospherically driven experience in which the threat of a cannibalistic encounter is always just around the corner. And honestly, as this game was designed by a development team that has a background in film visual effects, having worked on films such as The Amazing Spider-Man 2 and Tron Legacy, the beautifully crafted atmosphere comes as absolutely no surprise at all. The events of The Forest take place following a plane crash in which our protagonist Eric LeBlanc and his son Timmy are the sole survivors. However, after coming to, a disoriented Eric watches helplessly as Timmy is kidnapped by a man covered in red paint before falling back into a state of deep unconsciousness. Upon awaking, players then assume the role of Eric as he makes the journey to look for Timmy, all the while trying to survive the harsh forested environment by creating shelters, various weapons, and of course other survival tools as you follow clues of Timmy's whereabouts in the form of crayon drawings left behind in several caverns. Now, what separates this particular title from the litany of other survival horror titles out there, and more directly Green Hell VR, is the quality of the story's plot, as The Forest, while being an open world explorative title without defined objectives, does possess a well-crafted, easy-to-follow storyline that is very well written and doesn't simply feel slapped onto the game for the sake of giving players a why. And also, there is a nice particular focus on the combat methodology with regards to encountering the mutants, as they will not always look to attack the players immediately, but will instead spend a great deal of time observing the player, communicating their desires in their native tongue to fellow tribesmen, and generally using a variety of tactical approaches to combat the gamer. In fact, during combat, the mutants will attempt to protect one another from player attacks, use cover to stay hidden, and drag their fellow wounded tribesmen to safety, all the while keeping their distance and being careful to not overextend into the unknown territory. Guys, the combat AI in this game is absolutely fire, and I think more studios need to take notes on this because, as we all know, sometimes the AI in the games, they just aren't the greatest. Now guys, I do have to come right out and say this game is not for the faint of heart, as the guys over done a nice job of creating an eerie experience with excellent lighting, shadow usage, and particular attention to detail in the dwelling areas of the native mutants, as this game has caused more than one severe panic attack on my end, guys, and there is no other feeling than that of sheer terror that I could think of when a team of cannibals is V-lining right at you in the middle of the forest at night, ready to attack. The Forest is a ton of fun, but I would be remiss if I didn't point out a few of its flaws, such as the clunky menu decisions that make switching weapons during intense moments entirely too easy and always just a button press away, or the immersion baking third-person view when completing tasks such as climbing ropes, or the biggest one to me, the janky mess that is the crafting menu. And much like our previous entry, these aren't game-breaking in any capacity, but they do break that wall of immersion, which is exactly what you're looking for as a VR gamer. But all things considered, The Forest is an absolute thrill of an experience that is sure to keep your heart pumping and your head on a swivel, and it has its place locked in at number 4 on today's countdown. At number 3 on today's voyage into PCVR land is Boneworks, the community-loved first-person experimental physics VR adventure shooter, gosh, that's a lot to say, that has single-handedly changed the way that VR physics are looked at, right? Having players assume the role of Arthur Ford, a rogue cybersecurity director who is on a quest for immortality, gamers will enter the unfinished realm of Mythos City, where they will battle through several mysterious enemies, environments, and scenes with a variety of physics-based weapons. Now, as far as the plot goes, that's about all I'm going to cover, as this is not a title that the community has fallen in love with due to its stellar storyline, but instead the focus on this game is all about the interactivity between the player and, well, everything else imaginable. Very clearly inspired by Valve's classic shooter Half-Life 2, Boneworks was built using the early version of their One Marrow interaction engine and serves as a masterclass in immersion, with Voyagers being able to interact with virtually anything from cups to guns, fencing, individual brick blocks, chairs, and everything in between. Stress Level 0 really did do a nice job of giving Boneworks that wow factor and showcasing to the VR world at large what direction the future of VR immersion is going. Unlike the vast majority of games in the VR space, Boneworks fully simulates a gamer's body, legs and all.
Legs? I know you've been waiting for this.
Yes, legs. Using a technique called inverse kinematics that honestly was pretty interesting to learn about while making this video, but I won't bore you to death with the details. So the basic concept is similar to that of how animation studios such as DreamWorks or Disney simulate walking in their films, but the final result of that is
legs.
Yes, Zuck, legs. Combat in this one is interesting, and while it does have its occasional hiccups and wonky moments, there is a lot to dig into, with gamers being able to utilize virtually virtually. Anything as a weapon, having generally satisfying gun handling and reloading mechanics, as well as the ability to throw punches, elbows, or headbutt the absolute shit out of enemies, which to me is the most satisfying method, but to each his own. However, it must be said that this game does show you everything that it has to offer within the first 30 minutes or so in terms of what the game is about at its core, which of course is the physics. There is a reason why I have said the word physics now 4 times in this sections alone. They are the heart and soul of this title, so much so that one of Boneworks' biggest criticisms is that it solely is a physics simulator and not much of a game at all, which I can understand to an extent, but the real magic in Boneworks lies in the immersion and the mental and physical craftiness of the various puzzles found within this experience, as well as the game's hidden sandbox mode, of course. Also with Boneworks, the mod community has gone crazy with this one, guys. Whether you want to be Spider-Man, live out your greatest Jedi wet dreams, or play as Snake from the original Metal Gear Solid, Boneworks truly serves as one of VR gaming's first landmark releases, and I have a feeling that the One Marrow interactive engine that was developed as a result will be the biggest impact that this title will have had on the future of VR gaming, and for those reasons, Boneworks is locked in firmly at number 3. What Microsoft Flight Simulator is to planes, our number 2 game on today's countdown, Elite Dangerous, is to spaceflight, and that is to say, a hell of a time. Elite Dangerous is the ultimate spaceflight simulator and is a grinding adventure that rewards the patient, as gamers will engage in a litany of tasks in this one, from menial things such as completing pre-takeoff checklists, adjusting the ship's individual thrusters during flight, or trading with others, to the more thrilling ones like intergalactic piracy, high-stakes dogfights, and the exploration of galaxies and planets alike. This game isn't to be confused with something like EVE Online, where combat is the primary focus, but instead it is to be taken in as an experience of what true, well, projected spaceflight is supposed to be, with the emphasis on the game being taking in the experience as a whole while enjoying the entire Milky Way galaxy via a procedurally generated system with plenty of anomalies, events, and varied transgressions to be had along the way. Alongside this, the AI encounters during your travels will keep you on your toes as well, with pirates, brigand hunters, military patrols, or just fellow travelers all being a part of the experience into the vast horizons of the universe, which to me is the main appeal of this game. Now, the main storyline of Elite Dangerous, if you can even call it that, consists of taking on a variety of tasks from the game's various factions who reside in the human-inhabited and ran hub known as the Bubble, and with humans of course being, well, humans, the factions are at war with each other, pretty much sending you out as a neutral party to do things like collect bounties, trade goods, salvage recovery, or even shuttle goods. But once again, guys, for me, and I'm just specifying this again, for me, the primary draw of this game is the actual space exploration itself, as the, for lack of a better term, out of the world experience is truly something to marvel at, and it's something that you really do have to see to believe. Guys, this game is the ultimate space simulator, and VR takes it to a whole other level. Scope is absolutely astonishing, and having to do simple things like adjust direction or turn around to view an enemy combatant position feels absolutely amazing, and Elite Dangerous is set in at number 2 on today's countdown. So before we conclude today's countdown, let's take some time to look at a few honorable mentions. So for all of my grizzled veterans in the VR space, today's number 1 game, Asgard's Wrath, stands as absolutely no surprise, as this Sanzaru Games produced VR RPG stands as the golden standard when it comes to building out a full-length RPG for VR, supporting a robust campaign that runs at about 30 hours for solely the main storyline and about 60 hours of content for those completionists out there. Asgard's Wrath is a very well crafted title that provides a ton for the gamer to do. Asgard's Wrath takes place within the confines of Norse mythology, and to say that is even a disservice, as Asgard's Wrath may in fact have the deepest and quite frankly best use of Norse mythology in all of video games in my opinion, but players will assume the role of an undefined god who, under the guidance of Loki, becomes a guide of sorts to a series of mortal heroes as they must fulfill their intended destinies, which really kept this title fresh while playing in my opinion, as each mortal has a distinct playstyle as well as their own weapons, allowing for you to find a myriad of ways to dispatch enemies. But the first thing you will undoubtedly notice with this one are the beautiful graphics, art direction, and the attention to detail that the art team put into crafting the world in Asgard's Wrath. Whether it's the stormy seas displayed during the game's opening sequences, the beach-tinged shores with stunning views over the horizon, or simply one of the various dungeons, the visuals in Asgard's Wrath are among the best that VR has to offer. However, graphics don't make the game, and anyone who tells you otherwise is a fucking idiot. So luckily for us, the gameplay in Asgard's Wrath beautifully utilizes the medium of VR, with players being able to switch between a top-down perspective of sorts in your god form to directly impact various elements within our mortal form's environment, as well as grabbing creatures from the world such as sharks, turtles, or eagles, and giving them humanoid-like abilities that will invariably assist our many protagonists in propelling their stories forward, an element of which does add an extra level of wonder to an already stupendous title. Guys, I could wax poetically about this title for ages, right? I could talk about the varied combat between the respective protagonists, I could rant about the fluidity of motion during said combat, or I could even discuss on end the sheer magic that has been captured in VR's first real full-length RPG title. But instead, I will leave you with this: Asgard's Wrath is the best Norse mythology-based game, console notwithstanding, and yes, that does include the newest God of War entry as well, and not playing this game is doing a massive disservice to yourself, as Asgard's Wrath, outside of Half-Life Alyx, is the best game that PCVR currently has to offer. Alright folks, so there you have it, the top 5 PC VR games right now. Hopefully you enjoyed today's video. If you did, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, all that good jazz. Drop me a comment below, let me know if you think I missed a game that should be on today's countdown, or if you think I nailed it spot on, or maybe you just want to say nice things about me. I always take the compliments, they are much appreciated. Guys, thank you so much for watching. I am Tooodamngolden, your VR Voyager, and thanks for joining me in the simulation inside the simulation.